Hello, everybody. Today is December 12th on a Wednesday, and we're bringing you Block Digest number 146 at block height 553,544. And Bitcoin did not do it. It did not spit out a block at the last minute and screw up my block height.
Well, there you go, man. We got it right on time. I am on about my fourth or fifth cup of coffee, still kind of recovering from last night's meetup, but I think I'm all right. Kind of caught up a little bit. How are you doing today, Janine?
Well, luckily the sun decided to come out today, and so even though it's a very dark winter, it was actually nice.
It's kind of cloudy here today. I guess it's cloudy here, it's sunny there. Yeah, just every now and again, y'all get it over there. That's a good thing. But yeah, what's been going on, man? Because there's been a lot of discussion on Twitter about this first topic. You don't like the idea?
Well, we'll see. But Trace Mayer has put together a website and some videos and started pushing around the idea under the name Proof of Keys. And some other people have been using the name Satoshi Run to get everybody in the ecosystem together. And on January 3rd, have everybody who wants to participate withdraw all of their coins from custodial exchanges and other businesses to a wallet where they control the private keys, with the intent of establishing a kind of regular holiday of sorts in celebration of monetary self-sovereignty. And while I do think very much that people who feel up to it should be managing their own keys, have control over their own money, and I think that that is the core reason that Bitcoin was created in the first place, I do have a lot of reservations about this idea and see a lot of problems with it that I think is kind of very irresponsible to push this idea forward without addressing. Because really the reality is that anybody who's really of the mindset that they're going to manage their own keys, going to take control of their own money, likely already does. I don't keep anything more than a very tiny fraction of my coins on any kind of custodial platform for any length of time. If I don't have a reason for having it there, I withdraw it to my own keys and I maintain control of it. And pretty much anybody who's in this space for sovereign money is already doing that. And my issue with how this is being put forward is that, well, when you really come down to people who aren't already taking these kinds of practices seriously and already doing them, are going to be either traders who have their coins on an exchange or a platform for a very specific and logical reason, or new people who aren't really aware of much of how this space works or the reasons why Bitcoin was made in the first place, and are just leaving their coins on platforms like Coinbase because that's something they can wrap their head around. It's something that isn't too much for them to handle. And I think encouraging this kind of practice and the way it's being encouraged is really irresponsible, and is taking that latter group, new people who aren't really familiar with managing things themselves, and really increasing the risk that they lose money in a very serious way. For instance, I fully predict that in response to this, we are going to start seeing Ethereum giveaway style replies on Twitter and other platforms linking people to compromised malware wallets, or in the instance of hardware devices, something as bold as just trying to sell people a USB device that they claim is a hardware wallet that's preloaded with malicious software, which is actually something that a large chunk of people already do on big marketplaces like Amazon. If you go onto Amazon and you search Bitcoin or cryptocurrency hardware wallets, you will see a very large amount of blatantly obvious scams to anybody who's been in the space for a long time, but which is too much to expect a person new to the space to really be able to assess themselves. And I think that just telling people withdraw wallets or withdraw your coins to your own wallets on this day, if this really starts catching on and catching the attention of a lot of new undereducated people in this space, is nowhere near enough preparation or education before encouraging people like that to do something that is incredibly risky with money that, if stolen or lost, that there is absolutely no recourse to get that back. That's just gone. And you're going to have people who are anywhere between having just $100 or so in Bitcoin to people who have massive amounts of savings in it, despite not actually having any kind of technical grasp or education of how it works. And this really isn't an issue of, well, how much money are they losing? And if it's not a lot, it's not a big deal. It's the fact that this kind of encouragement without the proper education is putting people's money at risk, period. And I think that there is a lot more in tandem with this push that needs to be done in terms of educating new people about the risks and not just the benefits of managing your own private keys. Like, I do not want to see some clueless person take $20,000 of Bitcoin and withdraw it to a Windows computer riddled with malware and then lose all of their savings that they put into Bitcoin, which is something that is very probable to happen if this catches on and really gets the attention of people beyond hardcore users who already know what they're doing. Like, it is inevitable. And I think that anybody who is pushing for this movement or this day really needs to take that seriously in making materials and explaining to people the downsides that come with this so they can actually prepare themselves in a way that mitigates that risk. Because this is people's money. And as much as you want to scream or shout about how this is all about having your private keys, or people who don't manage their own private keys are your enemy, this is people's money. And encouraging people to take what for them is a huge risk with their money is incredibly irresponsible. And to push them into doing something like this without actually preparing them for managing their own money is something that I do not approve of, or I do not look highly at all. And beyond the issues to somebody's money, this is, as Luke Jr.'s kind of pointed out, a network-wide issue. Encouraging everybody to do this in one day, if this actually catches on in any kind of meaningful way, is a guaranteed way to cause a massive spike in network traffic, which is going to cause a massive rise in fees, which is going to create all kinds of complications for businesses who segregate most of their funds in cold storage and are going to have to take manual action to continually replenish their hot wallets to process withdrawals of a large amount of their customers. And this is going to cause all kinds of disruption for the network, let alone all kinds of panic, where people's transactions taking forever to confirm leads new clueless people to start speculating and panicking over businesses operating fractional reserve when they could not be at all, could be fully backed, have full reserves, and people just panic because of a huge confluence of events. And I think that if something like this was to be done, that this should not be a single day. This should be something that takes place over the course of a week or a month, that actually spreads things around and stagnates everything, so that it is not a massive overload on the Bitcoin network that is going to cause people to panic, that is going to cause all kinds of disruption to people who actually have to use Bitcoin on a regular basis, and give new people a million reasons to panic and start circulating all kind of nonsensical FUD and reasons to reinforce that panic among each other. And so while in principle, I absolutely do not have anything against encouraging people to manage their own keys, to withdraw their funds from platforms like Coinbase, I think that the way that people are encouraging this specific event and the way that people want it done in this specific event is very irresponsible, and something that a lot of people should actually rethink and start going out of their way to create more information and more educational materials for new people if they are going to go forward and encourage this event to actually happen.
Yeah, it was an interesting idea when I heard it. And, Trace Mayer's been around for a long time. And, I've got some respect there for what he's thinking. But I mean, at the same time, I think you're right. It's just like some people in that event will learn about self-sovereignty of their controlling their own private keys and, holding their own value and what all that means. But I think it would be few in comparison to those that would probably get hurt or end up losing some funding. I mean, like, just because all the tools and pieces are there to where everybody could essentially do it, I mean, it doesn't necessarily make it the best idea that everybody does it. I mean, we don't even really have much going on in the realm of higher education within Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies. I mean, it's a great time to celebrate, the network being 10 years old. But, there's some other things that come with the stress test, like you're saying, as far as network stagnation and just sort of like too much stress on the network to where, a bunch of, it's just going to kind of be a little haphazard chaos. We don't have really an asymmetrical fee estimation across wallets. There still needs to be we need to keep working at what we're doing. And I mean, eventually it will be easier for this to take place and not have to worry about people losing their keys. But I think that would be really bad optic for Bitcoin, where it's like, oh, there's this, network where you could participate and, be sovereign with your value. But it's a high risk situation, and, you can lose all that value just trying to figure it out and learning the system. And, that's where, I don't know, earlier back whenever I got in the system, it was very much an emphasis on like, just buy and send a small amount of Bitcoin. And, there's people coming into the network every day. And if they just come in the past couple of months and see a large push to do this, and they don't really understand, and they haven't sent a small amount of Bitcoin, even today, years later, it's still stressful sending a Bitcoin transaction. And, I'm always double, triple checking, and, I'm still just a little anxious about it. So I could see how somebody just a couple months in could mess up and lose their funds. And that would just be bad news. I mean, one of those in this, I'm just thinking about also, if you're stressing the network like this, don't you kind of give, like, yeah, you can kind of check the reserves on some of these exchanges, but you're kind of like showing your cards a little bit about vulnerabilities. If somebody did want to attack a certain part of the ecosystem, if they knew that there was this annual network move of Bitcoin transactions where they could have the most effect, as far as like, I'm going to get the greatest amount of Bitcoin because I found this vulnerability in this one wallet, that whenever on January 3rd, I'm going to be sure to go after it then. And just, it kind of just shows your cards a little bit. I like the idea of kind of spreading it out like over time, maybe making it a month-long thing. I mean, it could be just like it kind of is in Bitcoin. It's just like signaling, like, hey, I agree with this idea, and I'm going to move my coins over. And we could see like what size of the network that is of people that agree with that. And then, you could do different things with that information. And Yeah, it just seems like there's a lot of risk involved, and it's pretty headstrong movement right now where people are just picking it up and running with it. And when I first heard it, I was like, that's interesting, but it sounds like you're showing your cards. Like, that's something I was immediately kind of worried about, is like, if you put the network stress test to that, I mean, like, you're gonna, clue some people in on self-sovereignty. You're going to find out some exchanges that might have been doing some bad behavior, but is it worth it at the cost of, some people losing and some others trying to use the information from that test to their own benefit?
Mm-hmm. And then another aspect of it is the effect it could have on exchanges if large amounts of liquidity moves. You're going to be removing Bitcoin liquidity from these exchanges, which is going to have drastic effects on market dynamics. So this is removing the amount of Bitcoin that can be sold and completely unbalancing the books, making it, if it's widely done, very easy to artificially push up the price of Bitcoin, which is not something that's going to be rationally sustainable with very thin books, and also creates a really skewed incentive for people to immediately start trying to send Bitcoin back to these exchanges to sell at an inflated price, which is going to even more exacerbate the issue of network traffic. Like, this is just, it's not trying to do this kind of thing all in one day without any attempt to actually properly educate people, without really thinking through all the risks, is just reckless. And again, like, I say this as somebody who very much supports every person possible managing their own coins with their own keys. This is not a responsible way to try and encourage that type of attitude among people in the space.
Yeah.
So apparently I'm going to take the most positive stance on the panel towards this thing. I not only support it in principle, but I'm really not at all concerned about any negative effects that you brought up, because first of all, I should point out that this is not the first time that this kind of event or encouragement campaign has happened. It's the third year that they've done this in a row, and from what I can recall, nothing spectacularly great or negative happened in the prior 2 years that they did this. And also, the website doesn't explicitly say you have to move your Bitcoin out on this day. I mean, you could interpret it that way, but it just says that they celebrate, controlling your own keys and stuff. They don't say you have to move it on January 3rd. I've already seen people on Twitter who say that they want to participate in this, saying that they've already moved their coins out, like they did it already, a month or half of a month ahead of the day. So there's no requirement to do it on any specific day. So I think naturally it would be drawn out over a longer period of time anyway. I don't think anyone would actually do it all on the same day. And the only problem I really, because you pointed out people are, going to end up withdrawing to their virus-infected Windows computers. Actually, the website gives recommendations that I think are actually more extreme in the opposite direction, where they say to use Armory and Glacier Protocol and a Purism laptop, which, if any of you have actually used any of those things, for example, the Purism laptop, they still have, first of all, it's a very expensive laptop. They still have uncertainties with their shipping schedule. So the chances of you actually having one are low. The chances of you being able to implement the Glacier Protocol are very, very low. And Bitcoin Core and Armory are not exactly the most user-friendly wallets. So that's really my only problem with the website, is it doesn't give enough recommendations for a broader range of technical skill. But other than that, I don't have any problem with this campaign. The thing about it's like, the point of it is that we don't care about liquidity on exchanges, and yes, it might make the price go a bit wacky, but the point of all of this is that people should control their own keys more. So if it's just like most people, when they sign up to Coinbase and any of these exchanges, they don't know that they don't own their own Bitcoin. And that's the point. Like, people, because you mentioned people are going to lose their money. This is people's money. It's like, well, technically it's not their money. People have lost money through exchanges like Coinbase and others many times, there is no recourse with those exchanges because who the hell is going to help them? No one helps them. If you're in Bitcoin at all, you're just not going to get help. It doesn't matter if you're on an institutionally accepted or regulatory accepted exchange. The chances of you getting help are very low. So if that is the problem, then you basically you just shouldn't be in Bitcoin, because you should not expect that kind of help at this stage in the game. There's no one that's going to help you. The people that will help you are not going to be lawyers or regulators or anything like that. It's going to be other Bitcoiners who have been doing this for a long time. So I'd say that the only criticism I would give them is that they should do better recommendations for wallets. But I'm honestly this just seems like another celebration. I'm not that worried about it having negative consequences either way, because one, I don't think that the pool of people who are actually going to follow the advice is going to be very large. I think that the effect will mostly just be even for the people who don't withdraw their keys or withdraw their Bitcoin and hold it with their own keys. The effect will mostly be educational. I don't think most of them will actually do anything. It'll just be the hardcore people who maybe, oh yeah, I left some Bitcoin on exchange, so I'm going to take it off, even though most of my Bitcoin's off the exchange. So I'm not worried about it, and I don't really have that many problems with what they're doing.
Sorry, go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying as far as just it's good to, celebrate the fact that you can hold your own private keys. And I mean, maybe it will just be a small group. I just have a worry, it did happen past couple of years, but last year was pretty significant in the amount of people that came in. And I would just worry that, there are a good group of people that are going to grab it and run with it. And certain parts of the network that, are not even really in the Bitcoin network anymore. Other, forces out there might try and, use this to their advantage as far as just trying to get bad optics on Bitcoin, as far as people actually being able to secure their private keys, saying that something terrible happened with a certain amount of money, that they ended up doing the hack themselves, and then it got this big press release that week. And I could see it causing some problems. That's where I'm saying, I think it's an interesting idea. And I mean, I just think it's a little, reckless considering what happened last year, as far as the amount of people that came in that don't necessarily understand all this. But I mean, if the website that, is going through the Proof of Keys website, and, if there's good educational outlines of how to do it, like I said, it would be interesting to see what part of the network supports this, and what come out of it, and seeing the measurements. And I mean, I always think it's interesting to see the traffic and the way that it's moving based on movements within the network, and forces from outside, and how it all affects it. So I mean, it'll be interesting to see. And I mean, I don't think it's not going to happen. It'll definitely happen. It's just I could see with all the newbies coming in, there's going to be some loss of funds there.
And also, the one thing I want to bring up when people keep saying this isn't going to be a big issue is you do not understand the power of memes. You just do not. What was the UASF? It was memes. It was social signaling, and it was communication, and the amount of momentum that built up behind it was insane. And this is already shaping up to be the exact same kind of meme war. This is how this space works. The meme catches hold, it circulates among people. Crypto news sites start covering it, then mainstream media news sites start covering it, and all of the people you think aren't even going to hear about it all hear about it. And it gets built up, and a frenzy flies behind it, and everybody decides they're going to get involved because it's the thing to do. And this has happened time and time and time again in this space. This is half of the reason that we've been able to actually keep things in check in this ecosystem, is because of this dynamic of people communicating with each other.
And that just real quick, the media has also blown up in the past year. Just really, they'll report on everything that's going on. So it's different this year, this go around.
Yeah, but the thing is with the UASF stuff, it was different in the way that the people who actually participated and made a commitment to actually, install the software that could have implemented that soft fork. That was a very small group of people. The number of people who just had UASF in their Twitter name or something like that was huge, but they didn't do anything actionable that would have affected their Bitcoin. Most people didn't do that.
Because
So
they didn't need to. They would have if we actually came to a split. But until a split actually happened, they didn't need to. They just needed to throw their social weight behind it.
yeah, and so what's going to happen in this case is that probably a lot of the people are just going to throw their social weight around the idea that we should control our own keys. But I'm sure a bunch of the people who say that, oh, they're going to remove all their Bitcoin off exchanges, probably some of them, like if especially they're more wealthy institutional types, they're probably going to keep some of it. They're just going to do it as, a signaling thing. They're not actually going to do it.
Well, so what happens when exchanges put a disproportionate amount in their hot wallet, expecting people do? And now they're even bigger targets for hacking. I mean, if this is going to be known as something coming up for months, like we have the whole of this month where all of
Well,
these businesses are going to see this build up and think, how are we going to respond to this? How are we going to deal with it? And they're going to take some kind of action to deal with it.
sure, and they're probably going to do the same thing that they did the last 2 years, and they probably know how many people are likely to participate in it, considering the new people that probably came in the last year. They're going to anticipate that. And, at the end of the day, if it's not something that, I mean, obviously there's no incentive for them to participate in this, like getting Bitcoin taken off the exchange is not something they want. So if they can't deal with a huge influx of withdrawal requests, then they're just going to space it out according to however many people can be working on that at the time or what their system can handle.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think that stress tests are good. It's just one of those things where, like, yeah, for me, I kind of agree with Shinobi in the sense that if you give this determined date, it just like kind of gives people that might have known vulnerabilities or something that they know about a good time frame to make an attack, which could blow up in the media. And I mean, like, I'm just cautious, and I think it's good that they're, as there are a lot of people supporting it. I think it's a good thing that, you got guys like Luke and Shinobi kind of taking a different stance just to let people that are new in the space kind of understand that there is some seriousness to this, and you can't just, yeah, I'm going to be part of the group and go do it. It's like, if you are going to do that, then you're going to have to do your research and make sure that, there's some, you have a little bit of understanding of the fact that, there's vulnerabilities here that could be a problem for you, and you could make a mistake here, and here, and that could be a problem for you. And so, I mean, there'll be some good people there'll be some people learning things, but yeah, I mean, if it is like from now until this date, or like, just not such a defined, like on this day it's going to happen, but like from now until then, over time, like it makes more sense to me.
And no, Ratty or Vladdy in the chat, like I said, I absolutely do not have any contention ideologically with the idea of people having their own keys and managing their own funds. My issue with this whole event is how it's being proposed and how it's being put forward. Like, managing your own keys is not something you just tell an uneducated new person just do. You don't just throw them off the deep end of the swimming pool into it. You actually try to teach them how to do it properly. And I think that encouraging people to manage their own keys without actually preparing them to do so is unbelievably irresponsible.
Yeah, just to be clear, I think that, when I heard this, it was like, well, I mean, like pretty much a lot of us just don't do that. We don't keep our private keys on exchanges or third parties like that. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm already prepared, I guess, for this move,
Yeah, as someone who has never had and isn't planning to have any Bitcoin on any exchange or any custodial service anytime soon, I've already withdrawn. I withdrew a long time ago.
But I mean, it's like, it is a serious thing. Like when I first came to this space, I had nobody holding my hand. I had nobody to explain anything to me. And it was over a year before I was actually comfortable with how I was managing my keys. I literally set up a wallet, ripped out the Wi Fi chip and antenna, and left it on a completely air gapped device and never touched it for over 6 months before I even attempted my first movement of coins. I spent hours every day looking over procedures and best practices for managing private keys. And it was over a year before I was actually comfortable regularly handling and managing my coins. That is not something you can expect the vast majority of people to figure out without help and without education on the topic. And I think encouraging it without that help, without that education, is not something that a responsible Bitcoiner should be doing.
Well, consider that we wouldn't even be having this event. Like there's so many people in the Bitcoin space that recommend that the way that you get Bitcoin is to just buy it, which I find ridiculous because first of all, if you buy it through an exchange, not even through a person directly, and so you wouldn't even have this problem in the first place if you weren't telling people to go to centralized exchanges. And I also think that the chances of something getting screwed up in the process is a lot higher with an exchange than it is with like a mobile wallet. Like most people just put it in a mobile wallet. And I'm not that worried at the state of mobile wallets to think that the difference between holding it in an exchange versus the most popular wallets that we've talked about before, I'm not that worried about something going wrong.
I am. Mobile devices are absolutely riddled with all kinds of exploits, problems in the system, opportunities for applications to have different levels of access to the system and other applications, not to mention a shit ton of mobile wallets having their own security issues, such as the copay issue, which also affected the Bitcoin.com wallet, which, as Grubel's just pointed out in the chat, is the #1 ranked wallet in the App Store. I think that it is absolutely more secure to have your coins somewhere like Coinbase than put all of your coins on a mobile device, unquestioningly, because those businesses at least have solid cold storage or procedures to actually manage your coins. And most people have absolutely no idea how to even begin assessing the attack surface of their phone.
Yeah, well, you have to consider that if your phone is so completely pwned that any Bitcoin you actually put on the device is going to get stolen, then the chances that they're able to take your credentials and log into your Coinbase account and withdraw from that is basically the same. So
I disagree. And as annoying as it is, Coinbase actually has 3 different factors when your account's set up that you have to go through to process any kind of withdrawal or login from a new device. They're constantly screening which IP you're coming from, flagging suspicious logins from areas you've never been. It is absolutely more secure than just putting your coins in a Bitcoin.com wallet on an Android phone.
Is that by default, or do they just offer that as options?
It's by default.
Either way, I could see people having different use cases for Bitcoin, and some people use things like Coinbase. I mean, even myself, I used to, myself included, with their Shift card. I don't really anymore, and it's been annoying, but I could see how, people, they use those platforms, and I can understand, like, people getting Bitcoin from exchanges, especially whenever it's basically their only option. I mean, as far as just access to Bitcoin. And so I don't know. It's kind of like so here and there as far as like I get it. There's a good group of people supporting it, and I support those people. And I just I think that this past year we've seen a big blow up in the amount of users and the amount of media and the amount of adversaries for Bitcoin, and it just kind of like. it just gives them a target date. And like, but I mean, if there's good education going along with it, and it's not such a a very defined time for everything to happen, I think I don't think it's that big of a deal either. I think that for the most part, the only people doing it or participating in it will be people that actually really kind of came into Bitcoin with the understanding that they could be more sovereign and independent with Bitcoin in their system that they transact with financially. But I mean, they don't understand that completely yet. And so maybe this will get those people to move in to educate themselves, and they'll do it correctly, and there won't really be much hubbub about the whole thing. But yeah, I just think there's risks there, and like we have to at least think about those risks as Bitcoiners.
But I'm pretty sure that we will have more opportunities to discuss this. I mean, maybe even try to get Trace Mayer on directly and talk about it. But I think in the interest of time, we should probably slide along into the next story, because I think we just ate up the first quarter of the show on this.
All right. It's a, heavily discussed topic. So yeah, right on.
Alrighty. So next up, I think, is a hearkening back to the Wild West days of Bitcoin, which I think this is showing is absolutely not over yet. So I'm actually really kind of shocked by this. Wolfie Zhao, writer at CoinDesk, published this piece today, actually. And I think at least I'm going to be keeping a closer eye on this specific writer, because this is one of those pieces at CoinDesk that does not read like they're just regurgitating a tweet and adding commentary to it. But he's reporting on a large amount of mining operations relocating to Iran because of the low operational costs and the radically dropping prices of used hardware. You can get up to 0.6 of a cent per kilowatt hour electricity price in Iran due to a surplus in natural gas. And he's actually talked directly to a number of people involved with this, including Nima Dequan, a researcher at the Tehran-based crypto startup Aryatech. And according to Nima, there's actually been a large number of visitors going to inspect their farms to consider relocating their hardware from Spain, Ukraine, Armenia, and France. And he also said that their firm has recently signed a deal to become a local partner for a mining farm in Spain called CoinPods to start moving farms to Iran, with a three-phase plan, including a testing phase just to kind of get a small amount of equipment operational and see that it's working. The second phase, which is already starting as well, to build new infrastructure to host the hardware. And the third will be looking for investors from outside of Iran to finance this new operation. And this is, let's just say this presents a lot of potential complications for anybody willing to actually take this risk. There's actually even been some talk amongst Bitcoin whales in China about this. Where was his name? Chandler Hongkai Guo. Remember him? Actually posted a video on his Weibo account talking to everybody who follows him about the huge opportunity in Iran, which is pretty much slashing electricity prices to a quarter or less of what they can be in China, depending on the availability of hydropower. And specifically saying that he himself is not actually going to be engaging in any kind of visits or attempts to set up operations in Iran due to the recent arrest of the CFO of Huawei regarding sanctions fraud, specifically dealing with Iran. But he has said that a large amount of smaller and individual mining operations have been making inquiry to move operations to Iran. There's actually even a representative from a Chinese startup who spoke anonymously to CoinDesk, nervous about government reprisal, that they've already moved 2,000 miners to Iran and actually set them up and got them operating. And to add a whole nother level of risk to this, there is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, a branch of the country's military, which is effectively the group in charge of border crossings and customs. And they're pretty much in total control over which shipments are allowed to go through the Iranian border. So there is also a very high risk of people who want to move equipment to Iran that it's simply confiscated at the border. And although some of the companies being set up to facilitate operations being set up and equipment being moved to Iran, getting insurance for this possibility, that's still compensated in fiat, and your miners are gone if they are confiscated at the border, and there is absolutely no chance to get them back. So this is just this is a pretty crazy development, in my opinion. And there's actually a large amount of people in Iran, because of the kind of gray area that mining operations are operating in within the country, who are pushing the government to set up a licensing and regulatory regime to get rid of the legal uncertainty for operating mining farms in Iran to attract capital. But this is really just showing just how crazy and how much of a wild west this space still is. The price has plummeted since the all-time high this time around last year. Mining equipment is being sold for a steal despite its inefficiency, and the difficulty keeps dropping. And it seems there is a pretty decent amount of people who are seizing the opportunity despite the huge legal risks, the risks of losing your hardware and investment, the risks of the United States coming down on you for violating Iranian sanctions. They're still moving their hardware there because of the insanely low electricity prices and the rapid speed at which you can start moving into making profit, given how cheap used mining hardware is right now. And if Iran decides to actually seize this opportunity, we could see Iran really become a, despite risky place to set up a mining operation, a very favorable one that might catch on with people who are willing to take these risks.
Yeah, this was a pretty crazy development whenever I was reading through it. But I guess, yeah, when you look at the cost of electricity over there and how cheaply some of these, inefficient miners are, I mean, if you're getting the cost of electricity that cheap, it's could be very profitable. And some people willing to take that risk to jump over in Iran whenever there's just all this madness going on that involves them and sanctions with the West and stuff going on with Syria nearby. I mean, you're very close to actual battlegrounds and everything, and people still jumping over there to take that risk. I think, yeah, I mean, Bitcoin and the mining ecosystem. I mean, if the electricity gets cheap, I mean, you'll see people setting up farms, and it's a pretty interesting. I don't know. I've just maybe like others that are kind of hoping to, create mining ecosystems in their respected areas. They could say like, look, we're doing good with electricity, and we got a bunch of new renewables coming online. We want to attract this tech industry, so we'll just try and get electricity costs as low as we can, and help develop renewables and all of that technology. I'd like to see that continue on. And I mean, this is just showing how if you can get the cost of electricity cheap, I mean, you'll see people moving into the area and set up shop for some Bitcoin.
I mean, it's just, it really puts into perspective the kind of time horizons that some people are looking at. Like, they're willing to take these immense risks right now because of the perceived gains that you can have as Bitcoin appreciates over the next 10 or 20 years. Like the ability to operate now at these prices despite the risk involved, is worth it to some of these people because of how much they think that this investment will really appreciate and pay off in the long term. And an interesting thing that I want to point out, and I think that's my 2 cents on this, is for all of the miners who do relocate to Iran and set up shop there, there's no way for the government to really put their finger on Bitcoin that was mined in Iran. Unless somebody is crazy or stupid enough to literally put mined in Iran in a Coinbase output without return. There's nothing in a Coinbase. There's nothing in a block header that says I was found in Iran. There is really no concrete metadata that will tie any of the coins mined there to an operation set up in Iran. And so in the long term, this is very much something that these people who take this risk can get away with without having those coins actually connected to these kinds of operations.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I'm going to go into a little bit with my story. It's just like the, or can somebody possibly label these Bitcoins as being tainted or something? And it's just like there's nothing really there to say where it's coming from. I mean, so, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So I guess, yeah, you want to take us into the next one?
Was Janine going with the Janet Yellen, or was I going ahead?
I can go.
Ordering of the stuffs. I hate you too. Figure it out.
All right. So I kind of have 2 things, but the first one is really short because it's just kind of silly. Crypto Grinch Craig Wright has recently decided to make his Twitter account private again. On December 9th, he tweeted, "My account is now private. It will stay this way. If you think I need to listen to you, you will find out the hard news. But going forward, the next 20 years will show what I've been working on for decades." So once again, Crypto Grinch has made this claim about how he's been working on like super secret important stuff that will come out soon and prove us all wrong, which never ends up happening in the slightest. But he is really going to, if he's really going to keep his account private for 20 years while he does this work, I guess that's a win-win either way. And I saw this tweet. First of all, I want to point out there was a parody account that I love how they rephrased it. And the last line about how the next 20 years will show what I've been working on for decades. It's like, why don't you just show us what you've been working on for decades now? If you've been working on things for decades, why do we have to wait 20 years? Why do we have to wait 2 more decades to find out? Apparently, because he has to keep pushing back the big reveal date. And I saw this tweet through one of the parody accounts. I think there's actually 2 now. There was one, it was like bot Faustus or something. And there's another one that's like more silly than that. And I saw a funny reply below one of them by a Twitter account called Count Tweet, and I thought I would read it because it was pretty hilarious. "Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to tweet with you again because Satoshi's vision softly creeping left its keys while I was sleeping, and the vision that was planted in my brain, still insane, within the tweets of silence." And so what I'm really looking forward to after I read this interesting remix is that I want to see this holiday season a remix of "You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch" featuring Craig Wright and Roger Ver as Max the Dog, and Bitcoiners as Who's in Whoville, and N-Chain as Mount Crumpet. That's my Christmas wish.
Yeah, cartoonists, get out there. Do it.
You're a mean one, Mr. Grinch.
You have garlic in your soul. I definitely have garlic in my soul. I love garlic. Garlic is my soul food.
It's been a while since I've seen Mr. Grinch. Like, what does the garlic have to do with anything?
It's part of the song. I don't know why there's garlic in his soul, but apparently it's supposed to. Yeah, it's a whole. Basically, the whole song of "You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch" is like insults. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah. So the reason I brought it up is because apparently, there's been a lot of Disney remakes that have been announced lately that just make me cringe. And I don't actually think I don't know if it's Disney that's doing the Grinch one, but there's going to be a remake of the Grinch movie, and it's going to be like the same animation style as what was it? The other one, the one with the elephant that had Jim Carrey. I can't remember right now. Yeah, remakes of Dr. Seuss. Okay, so the Grinch one is going to be voiced by Benedict Cumberbatch, which I think is the weirdest choice of actor voiceovers. But yes, someone please make a Mr. Grinch with Craig Wright. That would be great.
Yeah, we're gonna have to get a little Christmas cartoons going in Bitcoin. Gotten that big, so and there's definitely been enough drama to create that.
All right, and the story that's actually a story, which was way more. It's another one of these weird predictions. It was from Janet Yellen, because on Monday, December 10th, she was in a moderated discussion with Paul Krugman, at the Graduate Center of the City University of New York, and she was asked about her time at the Federal Reserve because she is now a former Fed chair. And when asked about the future of the U.S. economy, she said, "I think things have improved, but then I think there are gigantic holes in the system." And I think this is the first time I've ever quoted from NBC, but NBC notes that last summer, Yellen had said she did not believe that there would be another financial crisis in our lifetime because of financial reforms. But she is now saying that she's concerned about a deregulatory effect, and that they don't have tools to deal with leverage loans, which, according to Investopedia, is a type of loan that is extended to companies or individuals that already have considerable amounts of debt and or poor credit history. So that doesn't sound great. I would be concerned about that too, but I think her solution would be much more different than mine. But yes, everyone, Janet Yellen made a prediction that the economy is not great. Surprise. We're all very shocked.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of been a pretty big given. I mean, like we've been discussing as far as like the stuff going on in France with these new austerity measures. It's like it's a pretty big reason why Bitcoin is so big, and everybody's pretty jazzed about cryptocurrencies because you don't have these crazy over leveraged products that have no real backing behind them, and people just investing in them like crazy and waiting for that to blow up. And I mean, how she could say that last year? I mean, with a straight face. I don't know. These Fed chairmen, I don't know. They're a particular type of evil.
Yeah, and I also wanted to mention something Paul Krugman did the day after this moderated discussion. He tweeted an article from the Washington Post about how American expectations for future growth in earnings, home values, and stock portfolios has dropped back down after the apparent surge during the election. So, yeah, these guys hark on all day about Bitcoin being stupid and, oh, they're all hoarders and speculators. But then at the end of the day, it's like, well, what are you guys doing? You're giving leveraged loans to people who can't, who definitely do not know what they're dealing with. And it's probably just going to make them worse off. And yeah.
Well, it's not even that. It's just everything systemically. Like it's not only leveraged loans creeping into different markets. You have the stock market being propped up right now by stock buybacks fueled by cheap loans. Even consumer spending is more and more being fueled by credit card debt and loans. And not to mention all of the debt related issues finally boiling to a head. We've finally really gotten to the point where global competition for labor is driving down wages. And I mean, like, people love to harken back to the day of America and when a worker could just go into a factory and support a family by himself. But they ignore the fact that the only reason that was the case is because most of the developed world had its infrastructure smashed to pieces in World War II. And America was pretty much running around without any kind of serious competition. And over the last half a century or more, that has corrected itself. And that competitive pressure is affecting wages. Like there are just a million different reasons why all of these systemic problems are finally starting to come home and roost. And eventually they are all going to blow up in our faces. It is not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Yeah, and I also heard another statistic. I can't remember where I saw it, but apparently what's happening now, because obviously student loans, I think that debt is still larger than credit card debt by a lot. And what's happening with student loans is that a bunch of students have decided, well, I can never pay this off. I'm not going to like earn enough, or it's too much to even attempt. And so they're basically just leaving the country and saying, not coming back because I have a huge debt there. So that's going to be interesting, having a bunch of young American expats, you know, going to various places in the world because they can't pay their debt and trying to run away from that. I believe that also happens in it's a problem in the UK as well. I don't know what the mechanism is for trying to force people to pay debt in the US. I don't know if that ends up being, you know, a court case, but I think in the UK, if you're not in the country, you can avoid that. They won't like go after you. I don't know how it is in the US.
Yeah, I don't really have any student loans, but I know it's a huge problem. I think it would. I mean, I think that those loans, they could just start withdrawing it from your paychecks in your bank accounts if they if I mean, I think it falls under the same way that medical debt and credit card debt is, as far as like you can't really you can't file bankruptcy on that. And I think they have a way to just take it from you if they want. I mean, they can certainly, you know, send the IRS after you or something like that. They could do things to where they can hassle you. I mean, you get hassled a lot when you have this debt. And I mean, it's a huge problem. It's one of the main reasons I think people in France are so pissed off, is, and anybody in these countries where these austerity measures are really kicking in, is because it's just so hard nowadays. I mean, you know, with all this debt and trying to just live a life. And you see at the same time, like these major corporations, you know, still doing great on the stock market. And like you're saying, they're doing buybacks and they're doing buyouts for their employees. It's you know, it's a hard time. So, I mean, to even look at it just a year ago and say that an economic crisis wasn't likely, I mean, that's pretty insane. I mean, but yeah, it's really just a matter of when.
Yeah, and kind of connecting this back with the first story about, you know, the need for education and telling people, you know, what the risks are. There is way too many people who bought into Bitcoin or other altcoins in the last year who used basically, you know, they basically took out a mortgage on their house in order to do that. And that's such a bad idea. Don't do that. Like, do not put yourself in any, especially if you don't understand the market, if you've never been in the market and you don't know how the technology works, do not put yourself in that kind of financial situation, because like it's just not something you want on your mind. You know, you don't have, you're not going to get rich quick on this stuff. So if you should just be dipping your toes and buying the minimum amount. And that's why, you know, contrary to what a, you know, certain security researcher has been telling people, dollar cost averaging is fine because that spreads out the risk. It has, and of course he doesn't care about spreading out risk because he says he doesn't care about poor people. If you're poor, you shouldn't be investing, of course, according to him. But if you are in that situation, you don't have a lot of spare money, do not put yourself into debt. That is it, because that is going to get out of hand way more quickly than just, you know, spending little amounts here and there. If that's how you want to get in, by buying.
Yeah, luckily I avoided that like the plague. I'll just say, looks like Blake Anderson saying that, you know, this these student debts, yeah, they're just they're labeled as what, non-dischargeable. Yeah, so try and get that right. But yeah, let me keep moving forward here with this next story, talking about talking about a report and a lot of loss of cryptocurrencies and stuff like that. So yeah, we got a report from an organization called CipherTrace where they outlined a bunch of hacks in the ecosystem and how those responsible were able to profit because of weak AML regulations. So this report caught my eye because CCN covered their findings that nearly $1 billion worth of cryptocurrency was stolen from exchanges during the past year. The report says that as of the third quarter of this year, the amount has totaled $927 million in theft from platform layers and exchanges. The most notable hacks were earlier this year with the 530 million stolen from CoinCheck in Japan, and then another 195 million lost from BitGrail. And yeah, a huge portion of these hacks were due to not just poor security models, but through listing weak networks like Nano and NIM. Those were the main culprits behind those two exchange losses. And the most recent hacks discussed here were BitHum losing $30 million due to a security breach with some massive XRP manipulation. Bancor, who also suffered a security breach resulting in the loss of around $12 million in ETH. And then lastly is the South Korean exchange CoinRail, which lost over 40 million due to the Bitcoin Gold 51% attacks. And yeah, so CCN covered this part of the report that focused on the hacks, but the report goes on to be very damning in its language to blast AML laws in weak countries. Like it opens up by stating, quote, 97% of criminal Bitcoin directly received by exchanges flowed into countries with weak AML laws. And first, I don't like that criminal Bitcoin, like you were saying earlier about the Iran thing. And like, I'll just keep going here. It's, you know, yeah, it's not like said criminal activity on the Bitcoin network. You're just saying this is criminal Bitcoin. And I think that's pretty dangerous. But, you know, they're saying like, of course, you know, it's going to flow into these countries where AML regulations isn't so strict. I mean, there's these Bitcoin and crypto is borderless, and, you know, they're not going to cash out in countries where basically who's been decided could launder money has already been chosen. So, all right, before I get too into the weeds with the AML regulation, let me jump back to this report. So some of the key takeaways were, quote, the analysis also identified 380,155 Bitcoins that were received by cryptocurrency exchanges directly from criminal sources between January 9th, 2009 and September 20th, 2018. In other words, 36 times more criminal Bitcoin was received by crypto exchanges in countries where AML is either lax or lacking. And that figure represents around $2.8 billion in today's prices. And yeah, I just thought that was pretty crazy going all the way back to the beginning of the network and trying to, you know, label like this percentage of it as criminal. And it just seems pretty blanketed. So they go on to say, quote, essentially, criminals are flowing large amounts of dirty Bitcoin into these poorly regulated exchanges and other services such as mixers, turning it into, quote, clean cryptocurrencies. Then they can move funds into the global financial payment systems with little risk of being detected. So they are starting to catch on that blockchain analysis is pretty weak for tracking a target within the cryptocurrency ecosystem if they know what they're doing. And so this report goes on to detail out how strict AML regulations has helped stem the flow of what they're calling criminal Bitcoin. So now here's like this conclusion of the findings. I think the report is really pushing, quote, opportunities to launder cryptocurrencies will be greatly reduced throughout 2019 and 2020 if cryptocurrency AML regulations are successfully enacted and enforced globally. Now, that doesn't seem likely just because we're seeing alliances like we covered in the last episode where 6 EU nations got together with Malta to build a roadmap for governance that helps promote these digital ecosystems and not really trying to restrict them. But they use the database from the U.S. State Department's money laundering and financial crimes country database to measure these weak AML regulations and point out areas that are strong on these points, some that are working to improve, and others that are weak. The measure is based on countries' ability to regulate illegal drug dealings, money laundering related to other criminal activity, KYC regulations, reports of large transactions, reports of suspicious transactions, and their ability to maintain records over time. In the country's breakdown by enforcement, of course, all those nations working with the FATF got high praise. In fact, the FATF recently did a report on the UK and how their regulations helped stop terrorist activity and, what they're labeling as terrorist activity. So now those that are weak in this report are countries that operate within their own monitoring and tracking systems outside the FATF. Then there are the rogue states, Democratic People's Republic of North Korea, Ethiopia, Iran, Pakistan, Serbia, Sri Lanka, Syria, Trinidad, Tobago, Tunisia, and Yemen. And the report says that Malta uses this list of rogue states to inform their AML efforts, and that the government of Malta with the FIAU are working to reduce their AML exposure and seize the crypto regulatory high ground and dispel any perception of the island nation turning a blind eye to money laundering. And the report goes on to outline all these other countries and how their AML regulations or lack thereof is either helping fight or promote terrorism. It also details out how reporting on FinCEN has increased and AML efforts have improved overall in the ecosystem. I'm kind of have my own little guess that this report was kind of funded by maybe some guys from a country like India, where they're like, we've seen they are the most vocal in the space, shouting that these money laundering efforts need to be unified to help stem the outflow of value from their country. And yeah, so the report, I just really wanted to go into the way that they were covering Bitcoin and money laundering and just the language used. And just because I kind of see that as like the battle lines for where these next powerhouses are going to be in these future digital economies. And I mean, it's pretty interesting report, and it goes on to pretty detail out like all these different countries involved. And but I think they're pretty sweeping in their assumptions as far as like saying that this is criminal and it's being used for terrorist activity. And I think it's kind of dangerous and something we should keep our eye on whenever it comes to countries trying to ban or properly regulate or just allow the ecosystem to flourish. But yeah, so that's the long and short of it. So what do you guys think?
I think this is the kind of crap they're going to try and use as a pretense to start trying to incentivize more international cooperation as far as regulations on the space. But ultimately, it's like there's nothing you can do to stop people laundering Bitcoin like this unless you start mandating people to check some kind of blacklist before they do any kind of activity on the Bitcoin network and make it a crime to not do that. Like, people can go trade things in person. You can engage in coin swaps. You can move into other cryptocurrencies in a multitude of peer-to-peer ways. Like, trying to clamp down on direct fiat gateways is not going to stop this kind of thing. And I mean, it's you just have to accept that. Like, trying to think that you can put a complete stop to this kind of activity like that is just deluding yourself.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, I mean, I called into this conference call yesterday for the Colorado Blockchain Council just to listen in on what they're talking about regulation, and they were bringing up that, like how that can be very restrictive, and if you're talking a blacklist, like, it's just gonna, we're trying to bring people to the area and invite people in to where they're being encouraged to help develop the ecosystem. And they understand that that is something that people don't really want to, they're not really trying to build out this permission system. I mean, this is all about permissionless. I was pretty pleased to hear what they were saying as far as building that all out. So what is this right here?
That's a criminal Bitcoin, but also just a test to see if I can get Hangouts to stop being stupid.
Yeah. All right, man. Did you have any comment on the topic, Janine, for AML and what else going on here with the millions in hacks?
One, two, three. All right, I'll take that as a no.
All right. let's continue on here.
All right. So next up, the CFTC is making a request for input regarding Ethereum, looking for the public to explain different questions about Ethereum regarding the technology, how it's used, market structure, and how these different things can interact. And people have 60 days to respond to this. And I'm going to encourage everybody watching now to actually make a response to this. Although, do not just start spamming them with a bunch of inane nonsense about Vitalik is a scammer. This is retarded. Like, they have a very specific list of questions that they want answered. And go look at them, but don't just start mailing a bunch of spam that is going to make them disregard actual input. But just some of the questions are: what is the impetus for developing Ether and the Ethereum network relative to Bitcoin? What are the current functionalities and capabilities of Ether and Ethereum network as compared to the functionalities and capabilities of Bitcoin? How is the developer community currently utilizing Ethereum? How many confirmations of the Ethereum blockchain are sufficient to wait to ensure a transaction will be valid? How is the technology underlying Ethereum similar to and different from the technology underlying Bitcoin? Does the Ethereum network face scalability challenges? If so, please describe such challenges and any potential solutions. Has the proof of stake mechanism been tested or validated at scale? If so, what lessons and insights can be learned from this? Relative to proof of work consensus mechanism, does proof of stake have particular vulnerabilities, challenges, or features that make it prone to manipulation? What capability does the Ethereum network have to support the continued development and increasing uses of smart contracts? How is the governance of the Ethereum network similar to and different from the governance of the Bitcoin network? In light of Ether's origins as an outgrowth from the Ethereum Classic blockchain, are there potential issues that could make Ether's underlying blockchain vulnerable to future hard forks or splintering? How would the introduction of derivative contracts on an Ether potentially change or modify the incentive structure that underlie proof of stake consensus model? Are there any emerging best practices for monitoring the Ethereum network and public blockchains more broadly? Are there security issues peculiar, or in other words, particular to the Ethereum network or Ethereum supported smart contracts that need to be addressed? Are there best practices for conducting an independent audit of Ether deposits? So, despite what a lot of people might think about the intelligence level of regulators, these are actually very well formulated questions with a very sound logic behind seeking answers. And I urge anybody who can actually put together articulate answers to these questions to do so and actually try to inform them in an accurate way before they start making regulatory decisions based on complete nonsense, particularly in regards to the scalability of the overall blockchain and how that relates to the load of smart contracts it can handle, and the numerous issues that exist with all of their proposed scaling solutions and the way that this can start systemically weakening the entire system. As well, although I cannot really see any question that particularly relates to this, I do think it is very important for them to understand the differences between Ethereum and Bitcoin, which are not really as big as people make them out to be. The word smart contract is constantly bandied around by the Ethereum community as some kind of magic buzzword or something that is completely beyond the capability of Bitcoin to facilitate, when that is just absolutely not the case. Bitcoin, like all other blockchains, is founded on simple smart contracts. And the problem with a lot of people in the Ethereum community is they delude themselves into thinking all of the advanced functionality is somehow specific to the Ethereum chain. And this is absolutely not the case. Any kind of smart contract that relies on a input regarding something happening outside of the blockchain in the real world depends on oracles. And those oracles are effectively in complete control of the outcome and what happens to those funds. And I think that it is incredibly crucial for regulators to understand that distinction. And that regardless of whether that oracle is a single centralized entity or some nonsense like Augur, where you simply have people voting in a proof of stake style model with coins, it is something that is gameable, manipulatable, and will have huge consequences and implications for things built out on Ethereum. So please, anybody out there who can actually put together reasoned responses, circulate this around to others who can do as well and encourage them to write in. Because as much as none of us like regulators poking their nose in this space, they're going to do so. And they might as well be properly informed before they start making decisions that are going to have consequences for the entire ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, like, just to second that, encourage people to go fill it out. I mean, we don't need to sit here and start beating up Ethereum and all that as much as we do that all the time. And like people understand that, there's lots of issues there whenever it comes to scaling and best practices. I mean, like, running a node's kind of a hard thing. So yeah, I'm not going to beat them up too much. I would, just also encourage people to go fill this out. It was kind of surprising to see the CFTC, the guys like asking questions about it, but I guess, they're curious if they should label Ethereum as a commodity or not. And I don't know, that was one of those where it's like, oh, but I mean, they've, there's a lot of misinformed or, people that are very, what's the right phrase? They've been paid off enough to where
Idiots.
things are just, well, there's definitely that there too. But I mean, like, there's enough lobbying, so to speak, I guess, where it's just like they get the language they want. And it's important that, people out there that do understand the issues on a technical level, write in and sort of play out why there's a problem there or where the problems are, and they can at least have a bunch of good information whenever they are going to make their decision on what to do there.
Mm-hmm. All right, and next up, a lawmaker in Japan, Takeshi Fujimaki, a representative from the Nippon Ishan Party, I think the third largest opposition party, is pushing forward proposals for taxation changes in Japan to encourage adoption. One of those things I said, I believe the last episode, that America should be doing instead of looking at nonsense such as market manipulation, when their entire reason for investigating things like that is based on just nonsense information. But he has 4 different proposals, the first of which is to create a separate tax category of 20% on crypto gains instead of the current 55% rate, because of the wild fluctuation in value that cryptocurrencies are subject to, unlike salary income or other things that are not anywhere near as volatile, and try to bring things on par with the taxation levels such as stocks and mutual funds to not discourage investment in cryptocurrencies as much. Secondly, he wants to alter the way that the losses and gains are reported, as currently you are not allowed to carry forward a loss from a previous year to lessen the amount of taxes you have to pay gains on in the next year. And he wants to change this so that's, again, similar to stocks and other properties. You are able to write off losses and pay the difference in terms of taxes instead of simply suffering the loss and paying the full gains. Third, he wants to create a tax exemption for trading between different cryptocurrencies because of the huge complexity in terms of accounting that is necessary to actually properly account for gains and losses trading between a number of different cryptocurrencies before actually realizing gains in fiat. And lastly, he wants to create a complete tax exemption for small payments in cryptocurrencies to actually try to encourage some kind of growth in consumer adoption. Because like in the United States currently, you actually have to keep track of gains based on small consumer purchases and pay those at the end of the year. And he looks at this as a huge disincentive for actually any kind of consumer related adoption at scale of any cryptocurrency, which is exactly the same kind of situation and attitude that is shared in common by most people in the United States. And so he has pushed forward for changes like this back in June as well. But I think given the fact that he's pushing them forward again, and given the general climate of cryptocurrency in Japan, specifically with the self-regulatory organization approved recently, that there is a decent chance that eventually these reforms might be pushed through, just because Japan seems to be a lot more forward-thinking and open as far as encouraging use and integration of cryptocurrencies into the economy. They're not taking anywhere near as a hard line stance against it as a lot of other jurisdictions in the world.
Yeah, I mean, like, definitely be good to help adoption. I mean, trying to get it down from 55% to 20%, that would be pretty substantial. But yeah, I mean, like to see any of this stuff getting put forward. I mean, like, just kind of going back a minute to that conference call yesterday, I was super excited to hear that they were bringing back that cryptocurrency bill from last year about the $600 spent won't be a taxable event. And last year when they put it forward, it was from Arizona and Colorado, and it was meant to be kind of just a guideline for on a federal level for all the states. Where this time around, it's basically the same language, except they're doing it for Colorado only. So hopefully that will get passed, because, yeah, I mean, like, I could see if these tax laws get writ the right way, then it will certainly help encourage adoption and people, not so afraid to buy and spend Bitcoin. So, yeah, always good to see like these sort of, changes in the legislation coming down the pike.
And next up is bad news bears for Mark Karpeles. Japanese prosecutors are seeking a 10-year jail sentence for Mark for embezzling and personal use of customer funds, claiming that he transferred over $3 million of customer money in a Mt. Gox bank account to his personal account during September to December in 2013, and began using it for investments for his personal business. And these are claims that he last year denied in court, but not being very familiar with the Japanese system, there's one thing I am aware of is that the laws are very different there in terms of holding somebody for specific charges and the way that charges can be brought against people. So I very much do think that this is going to go forward and actually see court. And depending on the evidence that the prosecutors have, there is a very decent chance that Mark actually does wind up seeing jail time for this, which honestly, I can't really say I feel too sorry for him about, given the entire way that Mt. Gox unfolded. And then the fact that he attempted to walk away with billions of dollars in difference after all of his customers lost an enormous amount of money in the liquidation proceedings for the Mt. Gox funds that are available now. So this is probably something that we're going to be revisiting and looking at over the next year as this starts unfolding in court.
Yeah, and one of the things that I didn't know about is that before Mark Karpeles started Mt. Gox, he had actually just left another country. I'm not sure if it was the US or somewhere else. I think it was actually somewhere in Europe. He left another country while he was being charged with fraud there. So he, like, Mt. Gox is not the only sketchy thing that he's been involved with. He's had other cases. I don't know if it was financial fraud, but he was being pursued by legal authorities in another country before the Mt. Gox stuff happened, and then he went to Japan.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions, I guess, surrounding, Mt. Gox and Mark Karpeles. I mean, like, I thought he was kind of in the clear because they had set up that Gox trustee fund to help refund people that were hurt at Mt. Gox, but it doesn't look so. I mean, yeah, we'll have to follow along and see what actually happens on this. But I thought he was in the clear, but guess not.
All right. Next up, 7 to go. Unicef has announced that they're investing $100,000 in 6 blockchain startups to solve global challenges using blockchain technology. And I am never going to give this organization money ever again, given how completely idiotically they're allocating funds looking at this. They're funding a number of different startups based out of Argentina, Mexico, India, Tunisia, and Bangladesh, some of which are for tracking different finances. Don't know why you can't just use a conventional database with cryptographic linkages. Tracking patient histories on a blockchain platform, which is completely ludicrous given the work Microsoft is doing on their identity platform, would facilitate any kind of need for something like that without the stupidity of trying to cram everything in a blockchain, simply having encrypted records with permissioned access based on what the owner decides. Ensuring vaccine delivery with a supply chain platform, which is, again, completely and utterly moronic. A supply chain has absolutely no increased integrity guarantees just because records are on a blockchain, because somebody still has to physically inspect something, still has to physically enter data into that blockchain. And if either of those things are compromised, your supply chain integrity platform is completely pointless. Like, a blockchain does not magically make data entered into it accurate. And anybody who thinks it does are delusional morons. Another company working on a social collaboration tool, I have no concept whatsoever for what value that creates beyond a normal social network platform. And you can build these types of things in a distributed way, such as Mastodon in a federated model or something working over BitTorrent. You do not need a blockchain for anything. And another company which is trying to develop an offline networking system that does not require internet access. So, a local network. Why the fuck exactly does a local network need a blockchain? I don't know, but I would love to hear whatever retarded nonsense that company is feeding Unicef, because it's gibberish.
Yeah, I don't need. It doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah, I'm kind of always dubious as to what's going on with Unicef, to be honest. Like, just one of those guys that you always see, like, saying they're feeding the children of Africa, but I'm always kind of curious as to what's going on, because wasn't there recently like a bunch of stuff going on about some of these Unicef employees hurting some of these children and everything? I mean, anyway, I mean, like, yeah, what they're doing in blockchain, I don't know. I mean, but doesn't sound like they know what they're doing here either.
This is what happens when a bunch of people who have no technical background or knowledge whatsoever are introduced to distributed or decentralized computing through a blockchain, and they think this is the only way to do distributed or decentralized computing. And so a blockchain applies to all of this. It's like, no, we've had other ways of doing distributed computing without blockchains. Blockchains are a very specific application. And if you're not, if you have no plans to think about incentives, if you have no plans to have a coin, if you have no plans to have, you know, any of the mechanisms that Bitcoin has or other blockchains have, that actually, you know, the reason that they exist is because the currency is somehow valuable in some way. It's not, it's like, you can have applications on top, but there has to be a functioning currency. And if you don't have that, then a blockchain is basically not, it makes no sense whatsoever. It definitely doesn't make sense for an offline local network. I don't even know how that applies at all.
Me neither, but we'll see.
Well, obviously, we've come full circle to the equivalent of a ring network where everything has to go around in a circle and take their turns deciding they're going to communicate packets, except it's a blockchain instead of a ring. We're reinventing the wheel, everybody.
Sounds so much more efficient.
I mean, if you're trying to do a local network, I feel like you don't like you don't even need a database. This sounds like some kind of council meeting application. Why do you even need phones for that? Why don't you just talk to each other and make decisions?
I don't know. All I want to say is somebody get a hold of the internal Unicef documents because I want something to laugh at. But
all right, let's go.
6 more things to go through. So apparently over the last week or so, Venezuela and Argentina have been seeing a continued parabolic trend in local Bitcoin activities. And this does not seem to be slowing down at all. So given the way that a lot of people in the developed world are looking at the price and crying inside and screaming, where is the bottom, and getting less and less enthusiastic, people in places that are really suffering from disastrous economic policy are buying the fucking dip, so to say. And even though this doesn't relate directly to the increasing volume, I do want to note in this Bitcoinist article, they mentioned the fact that Dash Venezuela was talking about KFC and every KFC in Venezuela starting to adopt Dash. Well, no. KFC Venezuela issued an announcement saying that this is absolutely not the case. They have signed no deal whatsoever to do something, and we're simply doing a pilot program in a single restaurant that had absolutely no kind of formalized deal or timetable or deployment plans set up involved in it. So while all of these people are buying crypto to save their wealth while their country's currencies literally turn into worthless paper, let's give a clap to the degenerate shitcoiners who continue at every opportunity to try to abuse and take advantage of these people's situation to pump their bags, and give them all a round of fuck you, you subhuman pieces of shit. Come on.
Oh, man.
Clap.
Yeah, I'll give him a clap. Oh, my goodness, man.
All right.
Sorry, man. I'm like, I was just like, hearing that last thing, I lost total track of what we were talking about there. But yeah, I mean, I could see definitely Venezuela, Argentina. I mean, like, this is where, yeah, the problems are. You're going to see people try and, hold on to their value. And I mean, Dash is not, I don't know. That's just one of those guys where it's like, they just, always trying to promote anything they can. And I guess one KFC pilot program was enough. But, yeah, I mean, I think we'll just see this continue on. I mean, like, austerity measures are kicking in other countries and, countries from the West. And, we'll start to see this as a growing trend of countries that are going through inflation and, those people trying to avoid that.
Mm-hmm. And next up, a shoe that at least I've been waiting for to drop for months now has finally dropped. The panel set up by the Indian government to deliberate how they want to approach cryptocurrency policy has unilaterally recommended outlawing all cryptocurrencies and declaring any activity completely illegal. So trading, spending, even holding. And in addition to this, they have advised setting up some kind of legal system or process for punitive measures, so that any investigative agency that finds people trading, dealing with, or holding cryptocurrencies can be punished properly. And if the government chooses to act on the advice of this panel, which from every indication I can see as an outsider seems very likely, I think very soon in the coming year, we are going to see Bitcoin and all cryptocurrencies become completely illegal in India. And this, I think like Janine mentioned, one of the last times we were talking about this subject is, in my opinion, unbelievably bad news for anybody living in India, and is just completely fucked up the way their government is attempting to remove any kind of opportunity outside of their control to manage their wealth is probably a necessary thing going forward in terms of seeing whether or not Bitcoin can function in a large population in a large jurisdiction when it is completely illegal. And I hope that anybody living in India takes proper precautions to not wind up in any legal trouble if this actually winds up happening. I would also like to say that they should not give up and that they should look at the plethora of tools and systems being built out in this ecosystem to enable them to maintain ownership of their Bitcoin and use of it in a private way so that the government does not actually catch wind of it.
Yeah, this was certainly upsetting to see, like, the result, or guess what, the government might act on, and what we've kind of been speculating as far as just news coming out from around like the G20, as far as like them leading that whole speech on how cryptocurrencies need to be regulated, and it was just, you don't want to see it outright illegal on any operation, or I mean, like, it's just upsetting to see. And I mean, like, because like we talked about with this economic crisis kind of looming and sort of all these problems kind of spinning out from it. I mean, it's not going to avoid India. I mean, it's going to hit them. And I mean, when it does, their population will be behind in all of this. And I mean, it's something that, at least for the most part, these people that are going to be affected from this system that's been on top of us for a long time has at least some sort of refuge with Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. And, so you just hate to see it. But I mean, like, it kind of has the way that things have been looking going that direction. I wouldn't be surprised either if this is the actual way it goes. So I hope everybody there in India that is involved is, taking the appropriate steps to avoid any sort of prosecution over there, and try and just, keep fighting it, and, bring in, some good people to argue your points.
I mean, this could potentially wind up getting very dangerous for anybody who's actually purchased Bitcoin or other crypto in India, because all of those businesses have their personal information. They've KYC'd themselves. Anything that they have withdrawn, the government will be aware of if they seize those business records. And then this becomes one of the most dangerous situations living with Bitcoin in a hostile jurisdiction is, how do you prove that you don't have it? Like, that is literally an impossible thing to do. And depending on how far this goes, I mean, if it is actually completely outlawed, I could very easily see a mandate to turn in your crypto, send it to the government, or start having law enforcement come around knocking on your door as they subpoena different businesses and start compiling lists of who actually owns Bitcoin. And that is a very real possibility if they go through with this and take this committee's advice.
Yeah, that's absolutely worst case scenario. I mean, hopefully if they did do something like make it illegal, they would at least have the understanding that that's the case, where if they did go after people, it's not necessarily like they're going to have that Bitcoin or crypto on them. But you know, as far as India and their language and the way that they've been discussing this topic, I mean, you kind of have to look at all possible options. So, you know, it's definitely a possibility, but man, that would be the worst case.
Well, if they outlaw it, then it's inevitable because what this committee is recommending is literally outlawing possession of it. And so there's really only two ways I see that unfolding. It's being forced to turn it in, or if you don't, have the government come knocking on your door and it being literally impossible for you to prove that you do not have possession of Bitcoin. There is no way to prove that you do not have a mnemonic seed memorized, that you do not have knowledge of a private key in a way that is not physically detectable.
Yeah, I mean, like that's where it's like we're gonna see if they do enact this and it is illegal. I mean, like how serious are they about trying to weed out anything that's already in the country? I mean, it might be a measure where they go back and say, like, okay, anybody that has participated, you need to somehow prove that that coin is no longer in your possession. And yeah, that would be hard to do. So I don't know. Hopefully, if they do make it illegal, it'll be something sort of just maybe not as heavy handed, just saying, like, you know, you can't really participate in this system going forward, and see where it goes from there. But yeah, I mean, we'll see, man, because right now this is just like a panel's recommendations, but we'll see how it plays out.
Mm-hmm. And next up, 4 to go. Bitmain is shutting down their Bitmain Tech Israel subsidiary, which was initially established mostly for the purposes of research and development, specifically R&D related to artificial intelligence for use in their Sophon project. And this is bad news bears for Bitmain. This article from Bitcoin Magazine kind of paints it as just another business having to downsize due to the bear market, such as Steemit and Consensus. But one of the things that they specifically pointed out in their IPO documents before the giant train wreck that unraveled from that started happening was that they were ramping up their research and development and spending on it to deal with or to compensate for the fact that they have not really made any significant technological breakthroughs or released any products that improved greatly on efficiency at the time. And a mere few months after that announcement, they are now shutting down a subsidiary in Israel that was specifically set up for research and development. So I really do not see this happening without serious financial pain. And I mean, if we look at and tally all of the losses that we've seen, they're down almost $1 billion or more this year. Not to mention what was spent on the hash rate fight, so to say, with Nchain in the recent bifurcated fork. So really, at this point, let's keep going down. And let's see if we can just completely burn Bitmain out of this ecosystem to the point where we see bankruptcy filings and assets being liquidated. Because not only is that the death stab for Bitmain, that would also take Bitcoin Cash down with it. Because as their assets include over 1 million Bcash on both sides of the chains, in a bankruptcy proceeding, those would have to be liquidated. And I want to see that happen.
Yeah, that would definitely be some mega popcorn, man. I mean, like, it's just, it's one thing after another going down over there with Bitmain and Bitcoin Cash and BAB and BSV. And I mean, it's just a lot of costs, a lot of hemorrhaging, trying to deal with all of the situations coming their way with new efficient miners and just people wanting to say that they're Bitcoin Cash or that they've got the roadmap, and it's got to be a nightmare situation over there. I mean, it would be ugly to see it go down, but I mean, like, yeah, it's one of those where, I mean, it kind of looks like it'll be inevitable, but yeah, it's just popcorn, more popcorn. With this whole story, I mean, it's just ugly. I mean, I mean, yeah, it's circling the drain. Bitmain.
All right, 3 to go. So, less drastically, but somewhat in line with the announcement from India, the People's Bank of China has continued their trend towards slowly cracking down on the ecosystem and pushing things out, and explicitly clarified that security token offerings, even registered under all of their relevant security laws, are illegal. And so they have, on this issue at least, taken the exact opposite route that the United States has, given that as long as all securities laws are followed properly, ICOs are perfectly legal in the United States. And they're looking at most of these types of activities having taken place in China as being suspected of being pyramid sales schemes, legal fundraising operations, and in most cases, outright financial fraud. And really, this is not going to completely stomp this out, because for the most part, there's still OTC businesses operating in China, despite all of the attempts that have been made to stomp out VPN traffic. I mean, there's still access to VPNs in China. And thanks to things like Tether, ICOs are still happening in China, just quietly and under the radar. And so, honestly, I think that despite all of these efforts, really what this is going to amount to in the end is this kind of activity continuing in China, just a little quieter and a little more under the radar. And we'll really have to see whether, in the end, China just kind of quietly tolerates it and clamps down when they find things, or if they follow through at a much slower pace in the direction that India seems to be going and just outright outlawing this.
Yeah, I was looking into this, and they were really focusing on Beijing. It's like, if you're planning on doing any of this stuff in Beijing, you better watch out. I mean, but yeah, I mean, at the same time, it's like, what it was, James J. Clayton, from the SEC, saying that these things can be done legally and regulated, and it's a good way to raise funding. And I mean, that's another one of the things they were talking about on that conference call was just, I think they're putting forward the Digital Token Act, where they want to do like a Kickstarter model for securities tokens and offerings, and trying to raise money that way. But they're still all hashing it out, but it's definitely looking positive. But yeah, I mean, China's pretty firm on their stances, but I guess, it's still happening just sort of under the radar. I mean, yeah, kind of similar to what's going on in India. So, I mean, we'll see though.
All right, 2 to go. Let's just get it done with. So first off, Gemini, the Winklevi exchange, has launched a mobile app for Android and iOS with most of the core functionalities of their exchange built into it. You can buy and sell, view market price, portfolio value, set price alerts, manage recurring buys, send and receive, and buy their stupid Cryptoverse basket, which is a weighted basket based on market cap of all the different cryptocurrencies they list on the exchange. And really, I don't have anything to say about this except, wow, finally, you tried to emulate Coinbase in another way and give people a shiny app to use. Let's see if that works and actually starts attracting more liquidity to the platform. Because as much as I would like to see a lot of the incumbent businesses in this ecosystem dethroned, Gemini has really struggled to attract any sizable amount of liquidity and customer base. So good luck. In other news, though, Square Cash, headed by Jack Dorsey, is actually succeeding in doing that. And recently in the iOS App Store, not only surpassed the Coinbase app, but also overtook YouTube as the #1 free mobile app out of any category in the App Store. And I mean, this is very promising. And personally, I'm just waiting for them to enable goddamn deposits so that I can cut up my Shift card, cancel my Coinbase account, and walk the hell away from them forever. But in regards to the overall Bitcoin integration into the platform and the company, their CFO is pretty much saying for now, their main drive with Bitcoin integration is not specifically to turn it into another revenue stream or profit generator, but simply to incorporate it wider into Square Cash and Square overall. And explicitly saying that they're not just going to stop at buying and selling. And as we've kind of seen, I think over the last, I think it was maybe around a month ago or so, maybe 2, they've released and open sourced all of their cold storage techniques and software so that other businesses can emulate that with a very solid architecture and security model. I fully expect Lightning integration to start coming down the road, given Jack's investment in Lightning Labs. And really, I see not really so much an attempt to follow in the footsteps of most of the big exchanges in this ecosystem and simply monetize as many shitcoins as they can to generate trading fee revenue. I see, given the slow and steady pace with Square Cash, a much more ambitious plan to actually really wrap the entire Bitcoin tool base into a product that a normal person can use. Not just something that they can buy and sell with, but something that they can actually spend and manage their funds with, that integrates into a very large merchant processing ecosystem so that people actually have places to spend it. And honestly, as much as I want them to enable the goddamn deposits so I can leave Coinbase, I think it's very encouraging the slow and steady pace they're taking and not rushing things. And especially looking at how they set up to manage their cold storage, that it seems to me that they're actually very thoroughly thinking things through before they take another step and aren't just kind of jumping off a ledge trying to pack as many garbage features and flashy things into an app as they can. They're actually, in my opinion, thinking through in the long term how to give something that has real utility to their users. And I can't wait to see what it looks like in a year or 2.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to see them overtake Coinbase, and pretty surprising to see it jump all the way above YouTube. But, I mean, I've really enjoyed the Cash App. I mean, like, they kind of came into the space with just the right mindset of they were already discussing the possibility of Square, Bitcoin being integrated into the Square, point of sale that they have. And then, whenever they did start with Bitcoin, they were very much, on the technological forefront of implementing SegWit addresses and doing batch transactions. And like he was saying, I mean, they're working on really good custodial solutions, because I mean, yeah, the deposits thing is aggravating, and it is one of those things where, you know, I've kind of started using it in the sense like I'll always keep like $20 in Bitcoin, you know, just sitting in that Cash App just in case or something, because yeah, once you withdraw it, I mean, you can't use the card anymore. So, you know, I mean, the way I was using the Coinbase card and the Shift card's always kind of just like, you know, if times are tight, you might need a little bit of groceries at the end of the month or something. So I just try and do it by keeping a little bit in there. But it is kind of frustrating. Eventually, they'll get the deposits enabled. But yeah, it's just good to see, you know, some people that are doing positive things as far as, you know, having some access to Bitcoin fairly easily off an app store with, you know, people thinking about the proper infrastructure behind the system. It's, yeah, always good to see those guys move up in the ranks.
In contrast, just a quick note, apparently today is Trezor's
No.
5th birthday. What? I'm talking about a contrast. Okay, so I'm mentioning this because it's a contrast in terms of like a wallet company and the decisions they make and strategies. And Trezor decided on its 5th birthday to release a metallic edition of the Trezor 1, which will be limited edition, 300 pieces. But it costs over 600 euros. I don't know about you, but I don't know what benefit. I don't know why they made it out of metal. I don't see what the benefit is because it's the same shape and it has a screen. I don't see what the metal does. And as people are commenting below the tweet, they're saying, guys, we're not multimillionaires anymore.
Wait, so a piece of steel that's like 1.5 inches by 2.5 inches costs $600?
I don't know if it's even steel. It just looks like some kind of metal wallet. They might have just made it out of aluminum. I have no idea what it just says. Metallic edition of Trezor 1.
That is crazy expensive.
Here's all I have to say is companies like that who take the same cheap piece of shit that takes maybe $10 to manufacture and then find some stupid reason like metal or a gold coat of paint to charge ridiculous amounts of money like that and push up a profit margin in the hundreds of percents. Go fuck yourself. How about you actually sit down and build something new that's worth the money? Because at this point, you're just acting like parasites trying to get your hands on people's Bitcoin.
Okay, so I just went to their website. It's 500 euro, and it has an inscription on the back that says 5 years of innovation and security, Satoshi Labs. So it's like a birthday piece that you would buy as like a happy birthday thing to them. I don't think it's going to be as serious. Like they said, they only have 300, so they're not expecting to sell that many. I mean,
like
I wish the way that they had celebrated their birthday by doing some kind of new product or feature introduction was something more along the lines of, you know, having the ability to access the Trezor wallet interface with Tor, or giving you the option to spend from individual addresses instead of this weird account structure that they have. Like, I like you, Trezor, but please do useful things.
Yeah, I mean, if they're limiting it to 300, maybe it'll just be like, you know, 300 of their biggest supporters who would donate money towards them or something. It's just a way to get something out of it, I guess. 'Cause, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of like, hey, you know, my birthday is coming up. Like, buy me something.
Alrighty. Time for final thoughts.
Well, I don't know if the screen share is going to work today, so I'm just going to read my final thought, which is just an update on what's been going on with the Reporters Committee legal contest with the U.S. government. The government filed a response to their supplemental memorandum and is still arguing that they have no obligation to make any indictment or charges public because, quote, the Reporters Committee cannot overcome the conclusion that if an indictment for any particular defendant exists but remains sealed, then it remains sealed because a magistrate judge issues an order for sealing it pursuant to that rule. The right to challenge any such sealing order occurs after a subject is arrested. The key part is that last sentence where they're basically saying that you can't get, if the person in question hasn't been arrested, they can't unseal it. Or at least there's no right to have that until the person is arrested. So that means that if we want to see it, apparently we either have to wait for the DOJ to do some other slip up where they copy paste, some other secret document into another document, make that public, or we have to wait until he's arrested. Hopefully the second one doesn't happen. They also rejected the argument that it should be unsealed because, quote, the fact that Assange has been charged is public. This was their argument. At a minimum, is easily surmised from what is already in the public record. And they said that based on the Fourth Circuit case from 2003, this court has previously rejected such an argument, noting that it is one thing for a reporter or author to speculate or guess that a thing may be so, or even quoting undisclosed sources to say that it is so. It is quite another thing for one in a position to know of it officially to say that it is so. So they're basically saying, if reporters don't disclose who the sources are that have contacted the Washington Post and outlets like that to say that there is an indictment or some form of charges that are available and are being sealed and hidden from the public, if those sources are not speaking in any official way, then that doesn't count as it being publicly known that the indictment or some form of it exists. Yeah.
I mean, like, seriously, I'm so, I don't know. I'm just so disappointed with the idea of the DOJ and the Department of Justice, in quotes. It's just, it's crazy the amount of stuff being hidden from the public. And, just like, and it's ridiculous the things that are being exposed as far as just like, okay, we'll hide this information, but we'll let this information go because this information can help build a narrative that we like. And it's just aggravating to see that institution has degraded to the level it is. And yeah, it's just I don't know. There's no real justice going on there. It's just sort of I don't know. It's not so friendly organization for sure. But my final thought, a little bit later, just had a meetup last night. It was a lot of fun. Had some people coming through town, and not just my meetup, but there was a meetup in Denver as well. The Bitcoin and beer meetup. They had a meetup last night with some good people showing up. More people showing up. I mean, like, I guess the Bitcoin buzz. I mean, it's going around as far as with the price and stuff's getting some people stirred back up. But we'll be having another meetup next week. Next Tuesday will be another Bitcoin and beer meetup, and on Wednesday I'm going to be hosting a Bitcoin engineering meetup where we're going to be talking a lot about scripts and second layers and the way everything kind of fits together, and if you could find yourself a little niche in the ecosystem. So should be some interesting discussions. But if you're in the area, be sure to check us out, Denver or Boulder. Just check out the meetups. Trying to build up this Bitcoin scene out here, guys.
All right. And my final thought is going to just be trolling a certain subsection of Bitcoiners. So here's Mr. Skeleton sitting on the park bench, just waiting here for the downfall of the nation state. And on that note, I guess toodaloo. We will see you guys on Sunday.
Later, everyone.